Welcome to this week's Cattle Call. I'm Susan Littlefield on the Rural Radio Network. And kind of the doldrums of summer, shall we say. The heat is here. Is that affecting the livestock? Well, it might be affecting the way we see some movement going on. It's feeders. Are they too high? Where are we sitting when it comes to the cash in the north? And really, how current are these cattle? Plus, I'm going to ask Brad to put his geek hat on because we haven't talked since that inventory report came out on Friday. So we'll kind of get his thoughts on what those numbers have to say on this week's show. And I think, Brad, maybe we need to start out with that because the inventory report came out on Friday. Everybody said, oh, surprise, surprise, heifers aren't being retained like we thought.
Thanks for asking that because I was thinking kind of dull today. I was trying to come up with something, exciting, something that was different than yesterday. But anyway, no, I think it's worth reflecting a little bit, at least if, like you called me a number nerd here on the cattle thing. I think that the inventory reports are quite interesting, more than most traders think they are, because you never see that they really get reacted to a lot. Although this one certainly you could see on Monday's trade with the deferred cattle, next August cattle sharply higher, almost $2 higher. Reflecting, I think, a response to the cow herd, which is the lowest in 52 years. As you mentioned, also with the lack of retention, didn't change those percentages really. The other thing that I maybe had mentioned earlier last week was that this monthly cattle and feed report, because it's the end of a quarter, is more it's more thorough. It actually breaks out the placements, whether the placements for steers or heifers. And like you said, the number of heifers placed during that quarter was almost identical to the number of heifers placed last year during the same quarter. It's I would caution everybody before they get real caught up in that is, don't forget it's July. The north, I think, is going to be a little more reflective of whether there's heifer retention in the north when we start getting out into that third and fourth quarter, especially the fourth quarter. We'll see what those numbers look like by then. A little side note here, being that we're talking about macro stuff here today, and that don't, one robin doesn't make it spring, as somebody has said to me before, but. So I don't know if any of you guys are watching this northern video. I have been this week. Just rough count calves. I counted about 88,000 steer calves and 22,000 heifer calves on that sale. 4-to-1 more steers than heifers. I don't know. Maybe there's a different way you sell heifers off of that. I do think probably more heifers might move direct, and they might be, speculating on some replacement quality heifers. But I was astounded that was so out of proportion that way. So I would still think the next move here is to look ahead to see if we don't get that heifer retention and see what that doesn't do to first quarter supplies, particularly of fat cattle next year.
Well, it's very surprising to me. Maybe it shouldn't be, the amount of social media posts I've seen. I know I sent you a screenshot as well of some of these sale barns with these cow numbers. So it makes me wonder, are we getting rid of cows and keeping some of the younger ones?
Well, that would be what one would normally expect. And you asked a great question, and everybody that I think has a vote here, I've been asking that question, and I get a little bit of diverse answers to that. Now, you go down to Missouri, and it's liquidation period because of drought. There's areas of Kansas that are still that way. So did you have some placements out of that area? A lightweight category was where the big placements came from, of course, that's 6 weight and under. And you saw an uptick in the foreign placements with some of these states that border Mexico, where you saw some an uptick in the Mexican imports. But so all of that. But you think about the average age of the rancher is no spring chicken, something like 76 or 77 years old. I've had a number of people, even where they're sitting in areas like the Dakotas, North Dakota, Montana, where they've got all kinds of grass. Some of these guys are saying, I'm getting $2,000, $2,100, $2,300 for a cow. I'm about sick of it anyway. This maybe is my retirement. And so this one's a little tougher call than 2013, where they just flipped a switch. It started to rain. We retained heifers. We held cows. And I don't think that's all bad for the industry, because we can go gradually into these lower numbers, and maybe we can have a gradually better market for a longer sustained period than we did in that 2014 slot.
So let's take a look at the fact that we're in, and you mentioned there's not a lot going on right now. It's kind of the doldrums, so we say, of summer. But for the most part, as you look at the overall picture, cattle market's doing pretty good.
Not too bad a doldrum, I would say, Susan. Well said. Here we are. I'm a bit sarcastic, but we all know that the cattle market breaks the week before Father's Day, right? We all know that the box beef is going to go down $35 after that, and we all know that cash cattle always go lower. I'm being facetious because you heard me say the same thing, that's what my expectation would be. Likely seasonally, that's what we would do. Here we are, almost to the end of July, and box beef dropped 11% off the highs. But where's cash? Well, Friday it was 190, which is the all-time high. Cash has done spectacular hanging in here through this first part of the summer. Now you get 2 weeks down the road or so. There's people already talking about maybe the boxes have bottomed here. I'm not sure quite yet. Maybe we got a week or two yet, maybe of chopping around, I think. But then typically you'd start to rally going into that 2-3 weeks ahead of Labor Day. And some of those features change back here to the steak items. So currentness is a big deal. There was a little 188 bid around up here in the north today, which is pretty good for a Wednesday. Didn't buy any cattle yet to speak of. So, feels like fully steady kind of prices is what it feels to me like here this week.
Do you have any concerns at how warm it is and the continued advisories that we see and the stress that this might mean on cattle weight gains and just cattle in general?
I think if you're bearish, you'll talk about nobody's going to feel like going out to cook a steak. I guess I'm not in that camp. The bulk of the population's on the West Coast and the East Coast, right? And those of us hard-headed people like me, I'm going to cook a steak tonight anyway, frankly, and have sweet corn. But what happens to cattle, particularly in cattle that are in outside feed yards and maybe don't have the ability to get under shade and sprinklers and stuff like that. What happens, of course, anybody that feeds cattle knows what happens. They don't eat. And when they don't eat, they don't gain. And then you even have the risk of some, heat stress related type, even death losses. So to me, this kind of weather thing ultimately would actually, in balance, I think actually be supportive because of the less weight, less cattle, less gain type of a thing. But hopefully your part of the world gets a little bit of rain and gives us a break here. We were supposed to get some last night, didn't. And today's supposed to be our hottest day. Hopefully we get a little better after this.
As we look towards next week and hard to believe August, any final thoughts on the way that July trade went?
Much better than expected, I think, for most. And you have a market that's still futures market discounted to the northern cash by a long ways. And I guess I know sound like an old record here, but I think the difference here is that, the beginning and end of every market starts in Iowa. Maybe somebody can argue with me. You can argue all you want. You're not going to change my mind. Talking about the cattle market. When we're backlogged in Iowa, you usually got a problem. We are the opposite of that. We are a month pulled forward on our inventory instead of always being a month late, which often we are here where we just feed these calves so they weigh 1,600 pounds. That's what we do. Now we're selling cattle that weigh 14 and a quarter, 14 and a half. I think that the leverage that gives for the feed yard, it's hard to put enough emphasis on how much that's helped us here. So we got a task keeping the sell meat this high, but so far so good. We chop along here through this next end of this calf crop. It makes you pretty excited with where we might be going by the end of the fourth quarter.
All right, we'll catch up with you in August. Hard to believe it's next week.
I know. Sounds good.
All right. Hey, how do folks get a hold of you if they want to talk more?
Oh, hey, our website's easy, kkbtrading.com. Or we still actually have a telephone here too, 712-722-0023. Thanks.
Thank you. As we always remind you, commodity futures and options do involve a substantial risk of loss and not suitable to all investors. And that's been this week's Cattle Call on the Rural Radio Network.